Yes, friends, welcome back to another podcast of Stay in the Race. And of course, I'm Bishop Dan Willis, your best friend. And I'm so happy we get to have this time together. I am really, okay, the young folks are going to throw me out for this. I'm digging this. They're going to throw me out for that one. But I'm so happy you're here for this episode of Stay in the Race and another part in the mini-series we're doing called The Day After, taken from a compilation, a consortium of just things that I've been through over the last 47 years of being a pastor, which I'm always quick to say. Doesn't mean that you know everything, but it means you've learned a few things along the way, and I really want to help you. We don't have time to reinvent the wheel before the coming of the Lord. So that's why I'm very attentive to people around me that have been through things that I can gain from, because we don't have time to reinvent the wheel. Learn from them, and sometimes even from their mistakes. I always said I never had to be an alcoholic to learn that alcoholism would kill you. I never had to be a drug addict to learn drugs would kill you. I've been able to observe life front row seat with people and say, I want to do that. No, I don't want to do that. And I pray that's what this podcast will be. So I'm talking about the day after things happen in your life. Today could perhaps be the most important one of these episodes, because today I waited till this podcast to talk about the one that hits all of us. And I pray that the Holy Spirit would open our hearts and minds to receive some wisdom and encouragement, because I want to talk to you about the day after rejection. Woo! Boy, that's the big one right there, isn't it? The day after rejection. So I want to jump right into this today. And, I have an appreciation for people who keep to script to a great degree. I veer off the beaten path, but I got you. I'm ready to go, and I want to talk to you about this today. Rejection is the most horrible emotion and the most horrible experience I believe anybody can ever battle in their life. It's one of the most painful things you could ever go through. I really believe that. Some 35, 40 years ago, I went under a doctor's knife. I don't know if you can see that there, but 9 inches down my throat, sliced a 9-inch incision to remove 3 tumors out of my neck, my vocal cords. And after all I went through that, recovering from that surgery, and the Lord has touched me. I never even went to a doctor for 25 years after that. The Lord so completely healed me. And I have a whole other spin on that. That's why I love the medical field. As you know, I spent 20 years in it. But I believe the wisdom comes from God. And so often doctors and nurses are the ministering agents of God to bring healing. So there's more than one way to be healed. But anyway, going through that recovery from that surgery was so painful. But the pain of that surgery, radiation, recovery, did not compare to the day when somebody very, very dear and special to me walked out of my life. The pain of rejection was so far beyond the pain of any medical procedure that I could ever have thought about. Rejection does not pay any attention to the color of your skin, how old you are, or how young you are. It is not calibrated by gender. Rejection has no respect for anything. Rejection bites so deep into your soul. I'm talking to you and you're feeling this today, that you really beg God to end it all. I understand now why sometimes I've heard people say, Pastor Dan, I just want to die. When I was young, I used to think that that was just dramatic. People didn't really mean that until I went through this experience some years ago, and I experienced true rejection for myself. And it was then that I realized those aren't words. That's a real emotion. I realized that was not being dramatic. It was my reality. In fact, maybe you've heard me say about it. I would lay on the floor and pray, God, please kill me. I know that sounds very extreme, doesn't it? Now, especially since I'm on the other side of it. But in that moment, that seemed to me the only way out of it was, God, just kill me. I'm going to die anyway from the pain. And I'd, eventually fall asleep and wake up and say, my God, I'm still here. Thank God I am a living witness. And I want to share with you today how I got on the other side of that rejection. And you will too. It's not easy to believe that when you're in the throes of it, especially if it's extreme, that there was no closure. Sometimes you just have to, I'm going to say something right here. Sometimes you just have to exit things with Jesus. There's no closure. This person never brought closure to this day. And I had to put that in the hands of the Lord, because I felt like if they just would tell me what I've done, what happened, closure, they just walked away. You can give and give and give and be to someone, hear me, and it will not prevent them. If in their soul is that dark spot of whatever it may be, jealousy, anger, whatever it may be, something within them, you cannot find closure. You're going to have to exit that with just Jesus. So, but it became very real to me through that rejection. Well, there's a story in the Bible that I want to use as the template about rejection. And you probably know it. I'm sure you do. If you're a church kid like me, Genesis chapter 37, through several chapters of Genesis, it's a story of a young man, 17 years old. His name was Joseph. His story is probably the most incredible story of rejection you're ever going to read in the whole Bible. Here's the thing. He was 17. Rejection does not wait till you're old to experience. Rejection doesn't wait till you've finally gotten your degree, or till you're finally debt-free, or till you've gotten your life together, or till you're finally mature enough to handle it. Rejection comes when you are already reeling from something that's happened in your life. Rejection often comes when you are already going through the battle of your life. Rejection, how can I say it? Rejection often comes when you're already off kilter. Rejection often comes when you're already exhausted. It doesn't show up when you're like, okay, I'm prepared for it now, show up. No, that's not how rejection shows. You're barely adapting to one thing when rejection comes and hits you in the face. And I said it just how I meant it. Joseph was 17 years old. I can relate to that because the experience that changed the trajectory of my life came when I was 16 years old. And I was thrust into being a pastor at 16 years old, quite unexpectedly. But Joseph was 17. So the point is, rejection doesn't wait till you're mature enough or wise enough to handle it, because it comes to destroy. We can just jump straight to what the end of rejection is. It comes to destroy you. But let me back up. In Genesis chapter 37 and verse 3, we find the Bible telling us about Joseph's father named Israel. At this point in this story, Jacob's name had been changed to Israel, Joseph's father. Rachel was Joseph's mother. So Jacob, or Israel, loved Joseph, this 17-year-old boy, more than all of his other children. Why? Because he was the child of Jacob, or Israel's, old age. So he makes him a coat of many colors. He's just very special to him, because when he thought his life was over, God looped back and gave him another favor and a blessing. So he loves Joseph. Well, by the time in Genesis 37, we get to verse 4, we find, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brother, they hated Joseph. They hated him. And listen to these words, could not speak peaceably unto him. I was reading that this morning. You see all the highlights in my Bible where I've highlighted that. They couldn't even speak peaceably to him. So by verse 5, everything really comes to a head. Joseph dreams a dream, and worse yet, he told it to his haters. He told it to his brothers. Now, here's where the game gets interesting. Please listen to this. Be careful who you tell your dreams and God's favor to, not because of what I've even preached before, that everybody, I've used different illustrations of be careful, but over the last 10 years, I realized the principle is the same. Be careful of who you tell, but don't be afraid of telling your dream. Your haters cannot change the outcome of the dream. So I think I used to preach it, don't tell your haters, almost intrinsically, like I was saying, because maybe they can tamper with the dream. Hear me. If God gave you the dream, no hater can tamper with it. But here's what I've come to realize why telling your haters your dreams can really mess with you. Because if they're not a celebrator, there it is. I thought, why have I always felt like don't tell your haters the dream? Well, I've told people something. Have you ever been so excited about something? You got good news or a check in the mail or something, and you just had to tell somebody. And you wanted to share it with somebody who could celebrate it. And you told them, but instead they were like, oh, okay, all right, can you pass me the potatoes and gravy now? And you're like, wait, this was life-changing for me. They can't change the outcome of the check you received. They can't change the outcome of the positive health report you received, but they just don't know how to celebrate it. I'm telling you, I can feel it while I'm talking about it here. I'm a celebrator. I call myself cheerleader in chief. You tell me how God has blessed you, I'm the boy you want to show up at your party, because I love to celebrate elevation, promotion, prosperity, God's blessing and favor in your life. So they can't change the outcome, but it is a downer if they don't celebrate it. Folks will come to your funeral, but will not come to your rescue. I just said something there for somebody. So that's why I don't tell everybody all my business, because they can't stop the favor, but they just are a Debbie Downer. They don't celebrate it. So moving on to verse 19 in that same chapter, the brothers said one to another, "Here comes the dreamer." In verse 23, what happens? It came to pass when Joseph got to his brother, they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. The same, this is what hit me, as God is my witness. The same coat that some folks have prayed onto you, they will strip you out of it once they think you're passing them up in favor. Let me repeat that for clarity. Some folks will help you pray for a coat of prosperity, but if you pass them, they'll start praying you out of that same coat they prayed you into. There's people that will celebrate you as long as you haven't passed them up. You don't make more money than they make. There's people, I've said for years, I've been the number one giver at Lighthouse Church because God has prospered me and blessed me. All but 1 year in 47 years. Think about that. I've been the number one giver. I tell people this all the time. That 1 year somebody passed me up, I pray, which was like last year, I always pray, "Dear God, I pray you pass me up." I want to celebrate that. So it's, you got to be careful because it's a slippery slope. People will pray for you to prosper until they pass you. Well, when somebody passed me in giving, I knew that meant they had been more prosperous. I was shouting and rejoicing. I wanted to take them to eat. I wanted to just celebrate them. That's the kind of people you got to have around you. Not people who will pray you into your favor and then talk about you when the favor comes. Somebody saying amen, listening to this podcast right now. So the Bible says they took Joseph, they cast him into a pit, and then the Bible describes the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. This was the day of rejection. They sell him as a slave. Joseph winds up in Egypt. He finds this seductress, adulterous woman in Egypt, Potiphar's wife. "Come here, Joseph, come here." What a mess Joseph was put into. But it took between the age of 17 to 32, somewhere in there is where the seductress, Potiphar's wife, comes into Joseph's life. So the story is exacerbated by somebody who wants to strip him down for real again. He's already been stripped down of his coat by his brothers. Now she wants to strip him down to his underwear and everything else. And when he won't lay with her, he runs out. She grabs his cloak and she says, "Joseph was running out of the house and he's trying to rape me. The devil is a liar. That was all the days of rejection. Joseph's own brothers burning with resentment and jealousy. And let me just address that. The worst rejection often comes at the hands of your own family. Woo! I wish I did not know what I was talking about. I wish. And some of you wish you didn't know either what I was talking about. In fact, did you know in the 6th chapter of Mark's gospel, Jesus said these words, "A prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and among his own kin." In other words, everybody else in the world will honor you, except for usually the people closest to you. I often have looked at somebody very dear to me, Pastor Benny Hinn, who I just love so much. And I've watched sometimes people in close proximity to him, they're so familiar, there's no honor left there. So I love Pastor Benny so much. It's my mentor, my covering. I travel with him all the time. But I don't let myself get so close that I become familiar. Because familiarity does breed contempt. And you lose that beautiful thing of honor. Sometimes those closest to you lose that in your life. And nobody can reject you like family can reject you. So those were the days of rejection when Potiphar's wife she lies on him. He winds up in a prison. Now let's go to the day after, which is really what I want to talk about. The day after rejection. And here's the problem, beloved. Most of us are still stuck in the day after rejection. We can't even get to the day after rejection. We're still telling the story about, when that old boy left me. I've heard wives talk about it. He had those green plaid pants on and a yellow shirt, didn't even match. She's telling it in vivid detail. And it's cathartic. We have to do it. We have to tell the story. But one way I learned, the day after rejection, start losing the details. Tell the story that he left, how bad it hurt you. You got to tell it. It's cathartic. I get it. But stop telling about the green plaid pants he had on. Lose that detail. Forget the yellow shirt. Leave those details out. And you know what I discovered? This goes back to my medical training when I was studying I wanted to be a brain surgeon. I aspired to be a brain surgeon. How the brain is wired. That if you lose those details long enough, you literally lose them. You have freedom to forget those things which are behind and reach to the things that are before. Oh, God, I'm setting somebody free right now. Start with losing the details the day after. Tell the story, but lose the details. All right, so because my time always goes so quick, let me give you 3 quick strategies for what to do the day after rejection. Joseph is in the pit. He's sold. Potiphar's wife, he goes through all that. What do you do the day after that? All right, here we go. Number 1, be careful how you exit the pit. Joseph was put in a pit and it wasn't right. What they said about you, what they did to you, the lies they told on you, best friend, it wasn't right. I get it. That's the truth. What they did to Joseph was not right. But here we are. We're in a pit. They talked about you. They lied about you. They cut you down. But the danger is when you're in the pit starting to say, if I ever get out of here, they'll never do it to me again. I hear people say that all the time. I've been a pastor 47 years. I bet they won't do it to me again. You will never get out of the pit that way. I have goosebumps when I'm telling you this because I've watched people stigmatize their own life, self-implode, stop favor and prosperity because they stayed in the pit. They never got to the day after because they made up their mind. When I come out of this pit, I'm going to settle the score. You have to come to the place the day after that when God brings you out of the pit, this is going to set somebody free. You don't give your haters the satisfaction of even thinking they did anything to you. When I was a kid, my mother, Dorcas Willis, God bless her, I loved her for what she taught me, a principle that stayed with me. I would plan these big, I know this will come as a surprise to you, big dramatic things I wanted everybody to be a part of. Specifically, I planned a big youth revival and youth banquet. I wanted everybody to dress up and wear formal dresses and just a flair for just having everybody to have an amazing night. Rented this banquet hall, sold tickets. It was so much fun. But there was one in particular, one. She wasn't an old girl. She was an old girl, but she wasn't old. She was young. She's like, nah, I'm not going. I got things to do. It hurt my soul. Now, I was a kid. I was probably 13 or 14 putting this event together. And I was devastated. Every day I would talk about it until finally my mom said, go through the event. Enjoy everybody that's dressed up and being there because 99% of everybody in your life is going to support it and be there. And when it's over, talk about how fabulous it was. Talk about how amazing it was. Talk about how great it was. And let that person realize, wait, you mean I didn't matter? Did you just catch that? You mean you didn't focus on me not being there? And it sustained my whole life. That was probably 50 years ago, and it sustained my whole life. You can't come out of the pit like, oh, you're not going to do this to me no more. You're not going to lie on me no more. You're not going to hurt me no more. I had to learn to go through rejection and come out I had to go through the fire and come out without the smell of smoke. I had to come out smiling and saying, how you doing? How you doing? Let's go. What's next? Don't call attention to you. Don't be victorious in the spirit of martyrdom. Everybody feels sorry for me. You know what I learned? I learned this. I just went into my high-pitched voice. You know what I learned? If you run fast enough, you can't hear what your haters are saying behind you. Come on, somebody. I don't like to preach on this podcast, but I'm a preacher. I get carried away with that. If you run fast enough, you don't even hear. I had to learn how to outrun the haters so I couldn't hear what they were saying. And I don't hang out with people that say, I mean you no harm, but I just want you to know what people are saying. I outrun those people. I don't listen to them. People used to say to me, Pastor Dan, you're a survivor. I started looking in the Bible. I never found where I was a survivor. I never even found where I was a conqueror. You know what I did find? I found I was more than a conqueror. I wasn't a survivor. I wasn't even a conqueror. I was more than a conqueror. You are more than a conqueror. Blood bought by the blood of Jesus Christ, Holy Ghost filled child of God, who he loves you more than he loves anything in his creation. He loves you. Whew. And because of that, you have to outrun the haters and listen. If God be for you, who can be against you? We know all of that. What happens after Joseph was gone from his brothers? In Genesis 38, Joseph's lineage, his brothers, now he's sold, but his brothers get into disaster. There was incest, there was all kinds of stuff. You may not like how long it takes God, but my grandmother used to say, the wheels of God turn slow, but they turn sure. They're very deliberate. Trust me when I tell you, you belong to God. No weapon formed against you can prosper. I don't know how long it will take, but the battle is not yours. Hold your peace and let God fight the battle. Careful how you exit the pit. We never hear of Joseph leaving the pit frantic, vengeful, or even hateful. Careful how you exit the pit. And then don't let your dream be turned into a nightmare by people around you. That's the second thing I want to share with you. Joseph's dream, he dreamed, these sheaves were bowing down to him, and he was going to be mightily used of God, basically, in essence. Well, if you're not careful, you forget that dream because of rejection of people. But keep the dream so it doesn't become a nightmare. Watch this. He winds up in a palace, then in a dungeon. Pharaoh, the top dog, has a dream. The same thing that somebody shut you out for, I'm going to say something right here. The same thing somebody shut you out for, God is about to open your future with. Do you understand what I'm saying? Joseph was a dreamer. His dream put him in prison. Pharaoh had a dream. The haters put Joseph in a dungeon. But the gift God put on your life will make room for you. The very thing they rejected Joseph for, Pharaoh asks, who can open up this dream? Well, there is somebody, but he's locked in a dungeon. Pharaoh says, go get him and bring him here. Think of this. Joseph's rejected for a dream, but the same thing that locked him up would be what gets him out and unlocks the door for him. That amazes me. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Joseph, your brothers said you were trash. Everybody around you treated you like trash. But there was a treasure in you. And because you didn't exit the pit wrong and you kept the dream, glory be to God. That's what's important. Don't let it become a nightmare. If I had time, I'd tell you about an 84-year-old lady in my ministry some time ago. I'll tell you the quick version. She'd been divorced 60-something years, but she never let it affect her. She was jolly and wonderful and divorced 60 years. One day, she didn't have very much at all. This 60-year-old guy, 56 I think he was, year-old guy came to me in our church. He's skinny as a pencil. She was big and jolly. And he said, I want to date her. Let's call her Bertha. He said, I want to ask her on a date. And I said, what? He said, I too. I just love her outlook on life and I want to ask her on a date. Now, his wife had only been dead about 6 months. I said, well, go for it. I'd love to tell you the details sometime. He took her on a date. Some of his kids loved it. Some kids hated it. 2 weeks later, he comes to me and he says, we want to get married. I said, what? He's 56. She was like 84. He said, we want to get married. This is a true story. He said, we want to get married. I said, oh my heavens. Okay. He said, well, who knows how long either one of us have. She's 84. I'm 56. Some of the kids showed up. Some didn't. He built her a house in Frankfort, Illinois, not far from here. Very bourgeois. I don't know, I think it was like 6 bedrooms or something. It was huge. It was just the two of them. I said, why do you need a house that big? She said, don't worry about it. I was cracking up. They were married 4 months. She was the love of his life. He died. He, not she. He changed her life. He loved her so much in that 4 months. He would say to me during that period of time, I experienced more love in this 4 months than I experienced in my 56 years of being alive. You know why? Because she never let the divorce, she never let the pain of rejection. God brought her out of a dungeon in her mid-80s. Now let me give you the final third point. Be warned, you may have to sustain the losers and the haters that were in your life prior when God brings you out of the pit. God always lets people who cause you pain, trust me, God lets them have to loop back to your life. Wrong exits do not make right entrances. If they exit wrong, God always makes them have to loop back. Joseph never trashed his brothers to his new friends. Joseph epitomized, though it had not yet been written in Philippians, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forget the things which are behind. I had to learn this about rejection. The people that reject you often have to loop back into your life. But when they come back, Joseph's brothers came back. They were emaciated. They were frail. They were in a famine. Their lives had been embittered, made hard. Joseph was prospered and blessed and the prime minister of Egypt now. The day when his brothers came back, they were frail and broke down. How are you going to treat those people when they loop back to your life? Joseph knew who they were, but they didn't know who he was. And in Genesis chapter 50, those fateful words, Joseph forgives them. And he says, as for you, you meant it evil, but God. That's why we always say, but God. I want to tell some of you here right now listening to me as I close this podcast. The moment you can say, it's over, I can make it. I will exit this pit without being frantic or being hateful or vengeful. And I'll hold on to the dream. I will not let it become a nightmare. And I'm preparing for the day they loop back into my life. I'll treat them how Joseph did. He sustained the very people that tried to kill him. I could give you some personal illustrations, but it would be a little bit too fresh and close to home in my own life right now. But trust me when I tell you, people that reject you, if you are God's child, it may take a while, but God's wheels will make them have to revisit it with you. You'll be over it. In fact, by the time you get to where you really thought you wanted to be with it all, you'll hardly even care. Your emotions will be so healed, you won't be bitter and angry anymore. So I speak that to you today, that the day after rejection, plan how you're going to come out of the pit. Don't get vengeful. Hold on to your dream. Don't let it be a nightmare, even if you feel like it's only gone from bad to worse. You're now in a dungeon. And then make up your mind. How are you going to treat the people that put you in that place to begin with? And be careful how you treat them. Because God often uses you, Joseph, to sustain the losers and the haters in your life when they loop back. And you have to be prepared for that the day after rejection. I feel so close to you. Like I've been a preacher 47 years, but I feel so close to you doing this podcast. Like we're just together. If you're listening to this while you're driving or in the hospital or just watching this, thank you. I'm ever so humbled by your favor to just connect with me. Please, please, I speak life over you. You're going to be all right. Rejection doesn't last forever. You trust me, you don't cry forever. You'll be okay. God is on your side. Please subscribe, like, follow, share. Would you please do that? And would you, if this is being a blessing to you, would you tell somebody to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow these podcasts? Please, would you please do that so that I can connect with you and we can just keep helping people not to have to live the rest of their life in depression, but be able to know that there's life on the other side of rejection. You're looking at somebody who, I'm going to wave the flag. Both hands here. Let them be the flag. You can make it, and you will make it. And when you get to the other side, all shall be well. I love you. There is nothing you can do about it. I speak life to you, and thank you so, so much for being my friend on this journey of the podcast of Stay in the Race. Please, again, follow, like, share, subscribe, whatever, all the things. Leave me comments. Oh, I love your comments. And let me know that you're my best friend too. Thank you so much for being here, best friends. Love you, and there is nothing you can do about it. Stay in the race.